Hello and welcome along to the Panto podcast. This week we have a pantomime legend for you. That is Anita Harris. Also, I need to say a big hello to all the new listeners who've just joined us, and just to tell you that there are over 5 days worth of interviews to listen to so far. Yes, 5 whole days. With the stories of cast and creatives from the wonderful world of pantomime. Also, if you do have a guest idea and you'd like to hear them on a future episode, then please contact me by email at pantopodcast@hotmail.com. That's pantopodcast, all one word, at hotmail.com. But back to this week's episode. It's the wonderful Anita Harris, and, well, she was very, very lovely and telling me all about what it was like working with some of the great names in the business, how she became a movie star, and what it was like to be a baddie for the first time. So please, sit back and enjoy the latest Panto podcast. But we'll get started.
Okay, darling.
Thank you.
Okay, darling.
It's nice to hear a southern voice, especially living up north. Have you been up much at all yourself?
Not recently. I did a lot in the old days. There used to be a club called the Blue Parrot or the Parrot something. But mostly went up for the 1 o'clock show, you know, that used to be on 90s when you were probably about 3 years old.
We'll get started.
However,
my guest for today's Panto podcast is the legend herself.
ooh, all together now.
All together. It's Anita Harris. How are you?
Hayden, it's such a joy to see you and to hear your stories of the people that you've been interviewing, and knowing that pantomime is in such good hands, because it's part of British history that we love and want it to be kind of worshipped by young people that come along and don't really understand. It's obviously, pantomime started with the Harlequinades and the period before the Victorian era, and then during the Victorian era, some stars came along. And for me personally, Mike and I, my husband and I, we worked on a show about the wonderful Vesta Tilley, who was the very first male impersonator. And she started out at the age of 5 singing in a little sailor suit. And then as she grew up, by the time she was 13, she was starring at Drury Lane playing Principal Boy. The wealth of talent that has come through the ages of pantomime, the fact that the stories and the fables are still so rich, even though humour has changed, all of the changes through history, it kind of sustains that thing that children, the magical thing that comes into children's eyes when they see the curtain rise, or even when they first go into the theatre. There's a frisson, even, you know, for mums and dads and for all of us, whether it's through the stage door or through the front of house. I still get excited. I think it's the most marvellous way of families, all the families, from babies through to mum and dad and granddad and uncles and aunts. And it's a way of bringing the families together and then sharing this experience. To me, it's just such a joy.
And seeing all those families together,
yes,
laughing,
yes,
hanging on every word sometimes. The ticket.
Or spouting out words.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes, they do.
So how did you actually kind of perform as such? When you were little, did you show signs of performing? Were your parents performers?
Not performers, no. My father loved music, and so I did learn piano, you know, before I went to school. I had half an hour's practice every day, but used to skate after school. So not really. I did sing "Now Is the Hour" when I was 3 at my granddad's cinema. Now is the hour. All together. Yes, we won't go there. But it wasn't really until school growing up isn't it funny how we all of us remember certain teachers and look back and always say thank you. And this particular teacher was a Miss Gobel, and the bell bit was what recalls how she was enticing in the way she got us involved. And in those days I could do descant, so she helped me to learn the differences between the vocalization and the measuring of the voice. And I'm not a Catholic, but I went to a Catholic convent, so the Corpus Christi, Fridays and Sundays, singing descant in church was just, for me, I think that was my true beginning of loving the sound of choral, of different voices together. And that still sustains for me now. And we talk of rock and roll, and you talk of the Supremes and their harmonies, and it's all a learning curve, isn't it, that takes us to wherever we don't know where we're going.
That's
basically.
It, hey? Would you have ever thought of the things you've done back then?
Oh,
as that
golly.
little girl, just
that little girl, yes. I think I was talking to Tony Blackburn not so long ago. He's a Bournemouth boy, and I'm a Bournemouth girl. I say we're both the Bournemouth Bells. But he mentioned on the radio not so long ago that he saw Doris Day in Calamity Jane at the Gaumont Cinema at the Lansdowne in Bournemouth. And so when I was speaking to him the other day, I said, do you know, I bet that we were there together, because I remember coming out of that cinema feeling I was about 2 feet above the ground. Doris Day had imprinted herself into my psyche, because the way she sang Secret Love and then Whip Crack Away, and she just came out of that screen into my heart. So I think that was my...
wasn't she?
Oh,
yes.
And then learning, because my learning curve had to be through nightclubs, and that is a training ground all of its own. Learning that she actually was a dance band singer for years on the road, and then this film star burst forth. So it's this magic thing of show business that, forget the lows, but the highs are just, they can take you into this stratosphere, can't they?
One thing I'm finding with a lot of the old variety performers and nightclub performers as well is they never talk about their time actually on the road, in the car, the miles that they've done.
Well,
and you sort of block that out. All the good times do flourish, and you sort of don't think about the 6 hours drives here, there and everywhere, and the horrible digs. And
well, digs are a different thing. Talking of another lovely artist, Elaine Delmar, I was talking to her not so long ago, talking about the digs in Manchester, because I did the Manchester clubs an awful lot, as well as some of the theatres. And all of those digs, when I think back how people like Vesta Tilley and Dan Leno, and as you said, all of these marvellous performers, the costumes and the trunks that they carted around on trains, and then there's this marvellous image of Q station, not Q, up north, the station where they all met on a Sunday morning.
I can't think what it's called. I know the one you mean. It's been mentioned before, and I should remember.
I was up there not long. Crew. Sorry about that. I just engaged my brain a bit. So Crew Station on a Sunday morning. If you get this picture of these Victorian long-skirted ladies and gentlemen in their, finery. Well, of course, they've done 3 shows the day before, probably in 3 different venues, and then catch the train early on a Sunday morning to go on to the next venue. And then Crew Station was noted, where they all met up to change change trains and these trunks and the porters carrying the trunks. It's such a different world. I guess it's kind of an imaginary world for us. But it's very colourful looking back at those artists. And as you said, there was sawdust in some of the venues that they played. It was hard graft. But out of the memory comes just the joy of it. Because that's when the lights go on, that's it. That's why I'm on this earth. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And you're still doing it.
But not on sawdust.
No, well, it depends on the pubs, doesn't it, or the venues. So, how did you actually then kind of after school? What was the process for you after school? What did you do?
It was
did
very
you go full time as a pro?
Well, I wasn't very academic.
Okay.
You got the scene, haven't you now? Yes. But I did skate a lot. So at 15, my parents sort of kind of thought maybe Hampshire School of Drama. So that's where I went for a year. But I skated every day, thinking that that's what I was going to do in Bournemouth, and used to go to London Queen's ice rink and train with a lady called Gladys Hogg, who trained so many. There was a Bournemouth skater called Courtney Jones I was his sparring partner. I had the dream of, I was actually in love with him, but never mind. At the age of 12 and 13, he was gorgeous. But he went on to become world ice dance champion three times, and just took skating he just was a storm on the ice with two different partners, June Markham and Doreen Denny. And then he went on to become part of the National Skating Association. So my world was full of the ice rink, basically. And of course, that also brought music into my life. I look back and I see I was presented with a cup when I was 12, I think, by Frankie Vaughan. And, these memories are so rich because we're growing, aren't we? We're growing, and we don't know where life's going to take us, but we do still, thank goodness, have dreams of doing certain things, So that was that. And then I was at Queen's Ice Rink, and there was a talent scout, and it was 2 weeks before my 16th birthday. A talent scout from a group of dancers called Bluebells. You're too young to remember Bluebells, but the Bluebell girls there was a Miss Bluebell, and she was based in Paris, and she had shows, all English girl dancers with very long legs. And I think that's the only reason I got into them, actually, because I didn't kick as high as the rest of them. But there was a place called the Lido. So the Lido had what they called a tank, where a beautiful skater called Jacqueline Dubief would perform during the evening show. And she was going to go to somewhere else, so they auditioned me to be the skater, right, when I was 16. Now, it turned out that I had to go in my little skating skirt to audition also as a dancer at the theatre in London. It was then called the Winter Gardens. Then it became the New London Theatre, where I went back and was in Cats for 2 years. Now it's the Gillian Lynn Theatre. So it's kind of spinning. Anyway, I'm waffling now. I'm sorry about that. Jacqueline Dubief decided to carry on, so they suddenly didn't want the skater, but they offered me a dancing job. Now, you're my parents. I'm not 16 yet, but my father said, I think we have to let her fly. And the first job I was offered with the dancing group was at this is dating me, the Brussels exhibition, and then Las Vegas. And they had to go to magistrate court to sign for a chaperone for me. It was all very formally done. All the contracts was very well done, and so we were very well looked after. However, when I think of what the worry that they must have had, anyway, I went out for 3 months and stayed for 6. So I had 6 months at the age of 16 in Vegas, and passed my driving test at 16 in America.
About a place to be.
Well, a place to be. It was a place called the venue was the El Rancho Vegas, which was the very first hotel come casino come theater, and the star of the show that we were in was Joe E. Lewis. Now, he was a big American comic who had been a singer, but had cancer of the throat and became a comic because he couldn't sing anymore. His story is filmed with Frank Sinatra playing the story. Think of the title in a minute. But so the El Rancho was opposite where Mae West was playing. A little bit further up on the strip was Victor Moan. A little bit further up were Louis Prima and Keely Smith. And then further up was the Desert Inn, and Sinatra was on. So all of these people. Now, we did 3 shows a night. This is a 16-year-old. I'd never worn fishnet tights before either. Learning how to be in a dressing room with 12 other, well, we were 12 girls, keeping your space on the dressing table, you couldn't go over, couldn't put your makeup up, and just learning all about being a chorus girl. But we had a night off every 12 nights, and our chaperone was allowed to take us to see a show. So I saw all of these performers. And to this day, Hayden, I can visualize and feel that, I'm sorry to use the word again, but it is magic of a performer entrancing an audience. And I guess that will never leave me. There are so many performers are sitting on my shoulders, and I've got strong shoulders. But isn't it wonderful to be able to remember that? I didn't plan it. It just happened. And my darling mum and dad let it happen. They didn't, they gave me advice. They said, if you're in trouble, go to the British consulate. In those days, and all of that. But coming back and then going back to Bournemouth. Oh, by the way, I was turned into a blonde because there were 4 brunettes, 4 redheads, and 4 blondes, and I was so they needed a blonde. Anyway, so starting in show business doesn't get more exciting, really. And one of the other girls was Amy MacDonald.
Goodness, wow.
And so they were all beautifully trained dancers. I wasn't. I was a trained skater. So in skating, everybody, you're trained to bend your knees. When you're a dancer, is lift everything on your toes. So different in structure of the body as well.
You said that you went to go and see all these other performers.
Yes.
Have you thought about that those other performers may have come to see you?
I don't think so.
Because they would have done. I'm sure they would have done their night off. They would have wanted to have seen what's this sensation here? What's this about?
Oh, it took me a long time to find who I was and what. And it wasn't really until I met Mike that I found my ground, my terra firma. He just took what I'd been kind of bandering about and formulated and found the right songs, and it just that was my real beginning. But the pathway up to that was as interesting, and we all have to have learning curves, don't we? And those learning curves, wow, they can batter us about a bit. but that's what helps us to maintain something that we grasp onto.
So after Vegas, you come
Oh,
back
yeah.
to beautiful Bournemouth, one of my favourite places in the world.
Oh, wonderful to grow up there.
Especially the lower gardens. Love the lower.
Aren't they beautiful? Yes.
I want my ashes scattered
Oh,
on
do you,
the golf
sweetheart?
course, on the little crazy golf course. That's where I want my ashes.
Oh,
scattered.
bless your heart. Well,
It's
I can
beautiful.
understand that. Why we were in Bournemouth, my mum and dad were actually Bristolians, and then they moved to Bath because their house got bombed in Bristol, and then Chippenham. So they were very West Country, my dear. But my granddad took my darling dad to Bournemouth. That was their holiday, as many years as possible. And Daddy said, when I grow up, I want to come and live here. And so when I was 7, he and my 2 big brothers and my mum, he brought us all to Bournemouth. And I have to say how lovely it was growing up there, you know. And I've now got some new friends that live almost the road next to where we used to live, and you just walk up to the front. This is the Boscombe Southbourne end, and there's the beaches are just still beautiful. You've got the lift that goes down from the cliff, and I don't know, there's just some things that you're so glad they haven't changed.
The pier's beautiful, although it broke my heart to find out it's now an indoor rock climbing centre.
Is it really?
It's no longer a theatre.
Well, that theatre at the end of the pier, you know, you'd have Lionel Blair there, you'd have all the
George
comics
and I remember seeing them there.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. Well, this is sad when theatres like that.
They're not allowed to change the theatre because it's listed.
It's
so they
listed.
Can do stuff.
Okay.
So hopefully one day it might come back.
Well, things do return, don't they?
Let's
yeah,
hope so.
yeah.
So
the circle of life.
So to go from very hot, I'm sure, Vegas at that time, coming back to Bournemouth.
Yeah. Bit drafty.
What was that? I bet. You know, middle of a desert and then coming back to Bournemouth, which is still a lovely place. Yeah. But what was that like for you? Did that make you more determined? Did that make you want to...
I've never been determined's not a word for me. I kind of drifted, but very pleasantly. I was never over ambitious. I just loved music and the world that it was taking me to. So when I came back, I went back to a bit of skating. And I went back to the Hampshire School of Drama. I was still only 16, you see, 16 and a half now. I think my parents thought that I would then go on to further education and get a proper job, you know.
She's had fun.
She's had fun. She's safely home, back to the nest. Then I got an interview with Cliff Adams, the Cliff Adams Singers, and they had a program. He had a program called Song Parade, which was on I think every Friday or Saturday night on radio. So I went up on the Bournemouth Bell to London, and I did my audition on a Thursday, and I started work for him on the Monday straight away. Again, filling in for somebody. Every job I have got was because somebody dropped out and I happened to be handy. Handy Annie. But now I was with him for 2 years. And there, I have to use this term learning curve again, because he placed me as alto musically. Having been descant for the school, he obviously found my lower register was better for the 12 singers that we were. And in that group of singers was a young man called Jerry Dorsey, who became Engelbert Humperdinck. So we trained and rehearsed in Chelsea because they also were in a show called Chelsea at 9. Then along comes Granada Television saying they want to do a program called Song Parade in Manchester, and they want 3 boys and 3 girls out of the Cliff Adams Singers. And I was lucky enough to get that. And so once a month, we went up to Manchester, and that was my first television, black and white. And during that 2 years, I think we must have did, I think, a whole year of TV shows for Granada Television. We were called the Grenadiers. So visually, that was it. I was part of another singing group, but to learn about cameras, to be told not to sing like Alma Cogan and shut up when I wasn't needed. Alma Cogan, by the way, was a lovely singer of the late 50s and 60s. And she had a very, for people that don't know, she had a kind of a bustly voice. It was a laugh in her voice. It was enchanting. It was kind of she was fun, but very loved by the British public. I did get to meet her and went to a party at her home, but that's why I mentioned her. But again, that time was so precious to go to a studio makeup. I can still remember the makeup girls that taught me how to kind of structure my face for the camera, and they're invaluable, those days, aren't they? And you can tell by looking at me, I still live through those learning times because they stay with you. So that was that, and then another talent scout saw me, and it was the agent for the then John Barry 7, and who became John Barry, who was the creator of the Bond movies, music and all of that. So he took me out of that after the 2 years, took me out and gave me a chance to be a solo singer. And that's how, and that was 1963.
What a time as
Woo!
well. Exciting times.
Yeah, the Beatles were just beginning to happen. And yes, so you're going through my early life, my darling.
I know, and I'm loving hearing it. It really is. I didn't know that about. I know you mentioned in the Vegas show when you got quite emotional about it, didn't you? When you saw that that's where places were, and
yes, and they weren't there anymore.
But again, this thing where places have to reinvent themselves, and
of course,
they're quite happy to just bulldoze a place down and rebuild it, and 10 times bigger, 10 times
because
flatter.
Young people want to make it their own and not interpret anybody else's life or theatre or whatever before. I'm very much aware of our past performers, and I relish learning about how they lived, how they managed to perform in what must have been quite difficult situations. A little bit of what we talked about before, and then seeing Sinatra take over a room, and those blue eyes that came from that stage and just melted everybody sitting there, male or female. So I want the past to be remembered, but some young people don't want that, and that's fair enough. That it's their life, it's their world. I don't know what it is about me, but I guess I like history, and I like to know who was around at that time, and who, when Vesta Tilley was that young and working that hard at the age of 13. How did that all happen? So I guess it's imprinted on me in my soul somewhere.
Well, when you go back and look at performers now, and people say, "Oh, you're like Robbie Williams," let's say, "Oh, you sound like Robbie Williams," who is directly influenced by Sinatra.
Exactly.
So it does go back, but people tend to think that this is a new routine.
Yes,
is it really like the wall routine? Let's go right the way back. That goes back a lot further.
Yes.
And so
But it's to be cherished. Everything. Oh, look, I mentioned before the circle of life. But what is wonderful is I cherish the people, every artist that I've ever worked with, because mostly each and every one of them, and I'm talking of Harry Seacombe, of Tommy Cooper, of Clive Dunn, of so many wonderful artists who just want for you to learn from them and then pass it on. I mean, you were talking about Biggins yesterday. He wants to help young people. You talk about Robbie Williams. They want to help, want to pass on any knowledge, because we're not here forever. But the audience, the new audiences, want to see the craftsmanship, the knowledge, how things are done, the magic. We talk about the magic circle we were talking about earlier. My years with David Nixon. And again with Tommy Cooper at the Palladium for 8 months. All of these people have spent years learning their craft just to be able to throw it away on stage and pretend that it's easy. Right?
Especially Tommy. It looked a shambles, but it was a well-rehearsed.
Oh, and how.
Shambles.
And how.
When did you first then... Who was it first? Was it David Nixon or Tommy that you first worked for?
Oh, Tommy.
It was Tommy.
Tommy, yes. It was my second Palladium season. It was Tommy Cooper and Thora Heard. No, Thora Heard. Freddie Frinton was the Harry Seacombe, and Jimmy Tarbuck, bless him, who then we went on. He was Buttons to my Cinderella, and oh gosh, you're bringing it all back. It's a joy to look back. But no, Tommy with Russ Conway on that particular one, and of course Clive Dunn was also within that framework of that show. So brilliant artists, and to be with them and to watch. But Tommy's trolley, it was like you do not touch. And to watch him, he would always do his trolley himself. When I say the trolley, that's all his props, every prop. If you just think 3 shows a day on Saturdays, those props had to be in the right place so that he just didn't even have to look where they were. He knew whether those hands were going to go to pick them up. So it's just to just watch these stars. And they're not stars because that was their ambition. They're stars because they have worked at creating something that is so intensely personal to what they want to project, to hear people laugh, to hear people's applause, whatever it is. It's the combination of the artist and the audience becoming one. And if you're lucky enough to stand in the wings and watch that, or listen on the tannoy because you're in your dressing room getting ready, it's just something that never tires. It's just gorgeous.
You sound like a sponge that just soaks it all up.
Well, I have. I've been doing it a couple of years now, you know. And you're right, I am a sponge, and I still love it. I still love to see artists enjoy what they're doing and make it happen. Just light up, you know. Spotlight goes on and you're on, Chuck. You're on, Chuck.
How did Panto come about then?
So my first pantomime was what was then the Southampton Gaumont. I think it's the Mayflower now.
Yes.
Could be. Anyway, it was with Jimmy Jewell and Ben Warris and a young artist called Mike Swan.
Come Outside.
Come Outside with Wendy Richards, yes. So I was playing a girl, Alice Fitzwarren, my first Alice. Well, that was a wonderful experience. I cannot remember who was Dame, but Jimmy remained a friend after that for all my life and was on my This Is Your Life all those years later. And bless his heart. I say bless his heart because he was the one that always, Ben was the businessman, Jimmy was the warm, you all right, love? You all right, Chook? When I went in, and we had snow like up to our ears. So there were shows when even the coaches couldn't get through the snow, through the New Forest or all of that area. But when we were full, I mean, it was a big theatre. When we were full, they came from everywhere, from all over the place in big coach loads. So that was my first experience of Panto. Oh, yes, it was.
And did you love that family atmosphere of actually forming a bond with all of your cast and your crew?
Absolutely. Yes, that I think is something that every office worker hopes to have. Every person that works in a pub or a hotel or in the nursing profession, any profession, if you can get a group of people that learn to respect each other, to love to see them flourish, to love them seeing do well, that's what theatre folk do best. If you get a group of artists that I'm immediately comes into my head people like Billy Dainty, who was a wonderful dame. Well, I could name drop like mad, and probably will a bit later. But it's just, as you said, it's that lovely camaraderie that happens. That towards the end of the pantomime, you've become a family. You've become a family of turns, as Harry Seacombe would say.
And it's also such a magical time, Christmas. Everybody's getting excited. Everybody's
yes.
all up a height, and you're away from your families. Were you staying in Southampton at the time? Or were you?
I was hopping back to Bournemouth to my mum and dad, wasn't I? A lucky girl. Except the nights when it snowed so much that we had to stay there. I think one night we actually had to stay in the theatre. They propped up little. Oh yeah, that was fun. Yes, it was. Mind the ghosts, the ghosts of theatre. Yes. So I think we're here to really talk about pantomime, and what I'm sure everybody that you've talked to must say is a child's, many at a time and mostly a child's first time of being in a theatre, of going to the theatre, of seeing an auditorium of other children and other families be together and have this sharing of watching. First of all, there's the orchestra or the band that strikes up, and then you've got the curtain rising, and then the lights, and then the people on stage, and it's the first encouragement that takes people wanting to go and see theatre for the rest of their lives. So if you do a good job on that stage, that child with his head on his hand, looking up at the stage, and the eyes are all lit up, and they just think they're in Wonderland. If all of us can do that job that says this is the magic of theatre, enjoy it forever, then that's what we're up there for, really. Yeah.
And if you have a good time.
Oh, it's lovely, isn't it?
Great.
Yeah.
Getting paid.
You hope.
You hope. Well, these things happen.
But yes, of course, darling. Of course.
So
it's a lovely thing
Alice
to do.
Fitzwarren.
I was Alice on the first one. Then chronologically, I don't think I daren't go chronologically because you'd be here for 5 days because I've done about 35, 40 pantomimes. But the next big, first time I played boy was Manchester Palace with Jimmy Clitheroe. Now, Jimmy Clitheroe was known as a radio artist. He was 3 foot something high, and therefore, to get to know him was to get to love him, because being in those days the odd one out as a child growing into a man, the performer that came through and registering with his pantomime audience, and yet being so grown up as a human being that he knew what was right for the children and what was right for the mums and dads and the granddads and mums. It was superb. And he taught me my first joke, which was, he'd take me by the hand and he'd say, "You've got to do righto, righto." So he'd say something to me and I'd go, "Righto, righto." And then he'd say something else and I had to say, "Righto, righto." And then he'd say, "You're standing on me right toe." It's the naffest joke in the world, but yet I learned it from him, and that was my first learning of comedy timing. And you see, in that pint-sized young man was a genius. He was also crazy about horses and horse riding. He had his own stables and his own horses. So I've got a lovely photo somewhere, which I'm looking for now, with us, with him and I, at the stables with the horses. And so there again, because you work so hard together, for in those days, the Pantos went on till Easter. So you did at least 12 weeks of course, it was, you didn't cram in so many. You didn't do 3, you did, 8 shows a week. So you had some mornings and some days where you could actually share some time together doing other things. And that you become a family. So he took me to his stables. And then we would go back to the theatre, and I'd be going, "Righto, righto," standing on my right toe. It's a funny old world, really, isn't it?
It really is. And the how can I put this? The fact that you became Principal Boy, which isn't performed very much now at all.
No, it's sad, isn't it? I'd love to do it again. Slap that thigh.
You could, well, that was what I was going to say. The legs. I've seen the photos. I've seen the amazing costumes you wore.
Well, costumes are very important, and I have to just mention too, Berkeley Sutcliffe. First of all, I did a Cinderella for BBC Television. Freddie Carpenter directed, and he brought in the costume designer called Berkeley Sutcliffe, and he literally with the scissors did the skirt of my Cinder's costume whilst it was on me. We made it so beautiful. It could have been just right for a Disney film. And then he designed my Peter Pan costume, which we'll go on to later. And it was made of leather, and he had real acorns, and he made cobwebs on my costume out of lace, out of net, beautiful net. And he just made me feel as if I lived in Kensington Gardens. I've still got that costume. And just the importance of the design of costumes in Panto, and then the craziness of the dames' costumes, and how each dame values their personality within that costume. Sorry, I wandered off into costume land.
You're absolutely fine. We'll talk costume.
Thank goodness for Burmans and angels and all of the the costume people of the world.
But going from a very girly princessy Cinders.
Well, I have slightly, because I did Cinderella with Jimmy Tarbuck before. Yes, no, hang on. I did Boy with Clitheroe, then I did Cinders again. Yes, that's right. Sorry, I'm getting the chronological bits wrong, Sorry about that. But so Coventry Theatre, because I had been with at the Palladium with Harry Seacombe, Jimmy Tarbuck, Thora Hird, Freddie Frinton, and Russ Conway. So then Jimmy was offered Coventry to play buttons, which is where I met Pauline Grant, the director, who then went on to direct my Peter Pan. Now, Cinderella, opposite Jimmy Tarbuck, with Audrey Jeans and Stella Murray and Mr. Pastry.
Richard Hearn.
Yes, brilliant.
Chatham boy.
Was he a Chatham boy?
He was a Chatham boy.
Well,
I'm from.
by golly, when he did the dance routine, he did the not the paso doble, the pally glide, or he did a wonderful routine dancing with himself as if he was with partners. Brilliant, another superb artist. However, with Mr. Tarbuck, who used to be the biggest teaser in the world, there was sorry, I didn't mention darling Fairy Liquid, who was Sue Nichols. So you will know Sue from Coronation Street. So with Fairy Liquid, she was, instead of the wand, she had a bottle of Fairy Liquid. Well, sort of, with the wand on the top. Right. So she would then have to freeze everybody on stage with her magic, with her wand, her Fairy Liquid wand. And then she would bring Tarby back to life and then bring everybody else back to life. But he would make her keep me frozen. So I'm in this position, right? Now, he is now whispering in my ear. He's touching me. I'm not allowed to move. Now, the audience are in on this. They are absolutely in hysterics. He's doing everything, tickling me, every single thing to make me laugh, and I'm not allowed to laugh. Okay, so that's one memory of Tarbuck. I will get it back on him one day. And the other memory is, in those days we used to have Carmen rollers to curl our hair, and I had two little kiss curls on the side of my each ear. And so I went off into my dressing room and I put the Carmen rollers in. And of course I realised I was on, so I rushed on stage. I've got these Carmen rollers in my hair. I'm sorry, but Tarby just took advantage of that too. Anyway, we move on. But no, Joyous Times, a really joyous pantomime. Again, Jimmy's craft was, you could almost put a curve of sound from the audience. He was not only a great buttons and fun and wonderful and charming, but when he did his 20-minute spot towards the end, the laughter would start at a level, and we would just know. You could hear this curve of laughter until it became belly laughing. And he just had this incredible way of taking that audience into his hands and just letting them release themselves into a stadium laughter. It just amazing. A graph, really, of laughter. And all of us backstage, we said, there he goes again. There he goes, and up, until the noise of laughter was such a sensation. And that his talent, again, for somebody, because he was very young, as you all know, who came from the Palladium, he was blossoming, but he knew that he could take that audience into the palm of his hand at that young age. It's wonderful, really, isn't it? It is.
And the wave. I've heard about the wave
well,
before.
That's the word I was trying to find, love. Use my
next time.
graph. I used the word graph. Graph.
That's very posh. But we are here in Henley, so okay. It's...
Anyway, lovely memories of all of that. Lovely memories.
And you never got your own back on him?
No, I'm afraid not.
He's a thinker.
I did look after his little girl, Cheryl. She came and stayed with me sometimes while we then went on to Great Yarmouth to do summer season, and his lovely wife Pauline. And yes, it just good times, looking back at lovely times. Jimmy adored Harry Seacombe as well. And again, the gift that Harry gave to Jimmy, you pass down the gift of giving. And yes, lovely, lovely. So that was Girl, that was Cinders.
And then you went, was it then
And
you
then
went Boy?
Then it was sort of Peter Pan time, because as I said, Pauline Grant directed that pantomime, and then she came with the offer of Peter Pan, which I think was the best creation of a role that I've done as Boy, simply because she insisted on keeping to the story and the script, but also we met and we went into Kensington Gardens and saw the statue of Peter Pan, and she made my character grow from the feet upwards, and we really worked on the power of the story of Pan and how the children, the Darling family, and how wonderful it was to fly. And I flew in through that window and landed on the mantelpiece, and then flew around that room, that bedroom of the Darling family, and I was allowed 2 songs. That's the only thing that was born into the story, and the 2 songs were beautiful to do. The first one was Build a House, Build a House, Build a Wall, da 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 da. It was lovely as we built the house for Wendy. Everything's got to be right for Wendy. But the song I sang at the end of the show it just took in. It was written by John Taylor, partner of Ross Taylor. And it was called Nobody, and I recorded it years later live. It's on one of my albums, because it was nobody's going to hold me and make me be what I never would wish to be, what I never would choose. Life must be, and it goes on. It's that nobody's going to tell Peter Pan how he's going to live his life, because he's going to fly forever. And the song took off, and it was just that wonderful thing, a bit like the wave of the comedian, when you know you've sung a song and everybody's up with you. It's just fantastic.
And when you were flying on wires,
yes.
did it feel like
excuse me? It's fairy dust. It's not wires.
Alert, sorry.
Excuse me, ducky. Don't forget Tinkerbell's in there.
But did it feel though? Did it actually feel like you were flying?
Well, if we are giving the game away at all, are we allowed to give the game?
Yeah.
Okay, so in my day doing Peter Pan, you're backstage. You've got the harness on, and you go up a ladder. And then there's a fellow with a rope on another ladder. He jumps off, and you go up, you fly. Now, there were 2 times when the magic didn't work, and the fairy dust didn't work, and I sort of went around the bedroom like Groucho Marx, trying to carry on with the story and say, the fairy dust is going to work any minute now. And of course, the audience have gone, and because once the wire had left you, it goes up into the flies, and it takes about an hour for them to sort them out, because they've twisted around. Sorry, these are the tales that young people should not know. All right, because it really is fairy dust that makes you fly. Okay, you must let little babies believe, Yes, until you're 21, and then maybe you can be allowed to know that doesn't always work.
You weren't even 21 then, were you, when you were doing this? Were you? How old would you have been when you were doing those ones?
Oh, I was late 20s.
You were late 20s.
Yeah. Did 2 years on tour with that for Helen Arnold, who was the wife of Tom Arnold. And Tom Arnold, the son, was very much in the management there. Yes, that you see, they wanted to do everything right for the J.M. Barrie story. I mean, Peter Pan's have been, changed a lot, and that's fine. But if you want to be true to the writer, which they instilled into me, that was the best way. And I have to now talk about the wonderful Alan Curtis, who was my Captain Hook. All right, now Alan, superb and fine actor. My first learnings of how a villain should be. There's a scene on the poop deck. I think it's the beginning of Act 2, because it's in 3 acts, the original play, where the curtain rises. There's been absolute mayhem in the act before, at the end, where all the kids, all the lost boys are fighting the pirates, and it's all absolutely mad. So when the second act starts, okay, they've changed the set, it's now the poop deck. The curtain goes up, and now all the children in the audience are just going potty. They are booing, they are screaming at Captain Hook. The place is bedlam. And Alan stood there many a night. Now I'm crouched down under the poop deck, ready for my next entrance, okay? Now, in rehearsals, it was about 30 seconds. By the time we finished our 2-year run, it was about 3 minutes, because Alan, just stood his ground. He stood there. He allowed those children in the audience to wear themselves out until suddenly there was silence. And his first line, J.M. Barrie's first line of the second scene, the second act, is, "How still the night is." And of course, all the grown-ups really appreciated how clever he was. He just let the children wear themselves out, booing, and and then this sudden silence. How still the night is. Yes, magic. But of course, I'm waiting to come out and have a fight with him. Anyway, magic moments, magic memories. Lovely, darling.
When you went from sort of Alice Fitzwarren and Cinders through to playing a boy,
yeah,
did you feel like you had to kind of, you said about nods to the past and nods to other people, did you feel like you had kind of a duty to people like Vesta Tilley to portray, I'm going to be a boy?
Well, I always was a bit of a tomboy. Very good question. And probably without thinking too deeply about it, yes. I think I learned at the Hampshire School of Drama one very important thing, and the word is true. Miss Cockin was her name that ran the school. She said, whatever you do, just remember to be true. True not only to yourself, but true to the writer, whether it's Shakespeare, whoever, true to the songwriter, the music, whatever it is. Try and bring everything into the moment of truth. And so that's, a highfalutin way of saying, I think that I tried to tell the story every time, whether it was Jack and Jack and the Beanstalk, Aladdin, all of them, Dick. And I was lucky to have, not only was my Mike partly writing some of my parts of the script, but a lot of the writers, when I was doing Richmond Theatre, I was a very good writer there. So you must have heard this 1,000 times from every actor, that if you've got a good script, you don't need to you just just learn the lines and don't bump into the furniture, basically. Because if the lines are beautiful to do, and if for me, I would usually start pantomime with a huge dance routine, song and dance routine. You know, in Dick Whittington, it would be London is London, da, 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 you know. So and with the other dancers and the rest of the company, so that's great. And then you get into the script and you're into the story and you're having a go with your mum who's playing Dame and all of that, and it's just a joy, you know.
And you found comedy so easy. That's the thing.
Oh, I don't know.
The way you portray yourself, you play it easy. Whether or not you found it easy is different.
At the time I found I going from pantomime and from Dear Jimmy Clitheroe, to when I was aware that I had a lot more to learn, was when I did my first TV show with Bruce Forsyth, and it was a sketch, and I knew I wasn't doing it right, and I knew that it wasn't feeling comfortable with the rest of the cast. So then there was a little break, and we were told to go back to our dressing room. And Bruce called me over and he said, "Do you want to go through those lines?" I said, "Oh, please." And bless his heart, we sat on the edge of the stage, of the TV stage, and we did the lines. And he said, "No, just stop there and put the accent on this." And what he did that day, again, I will never forget, because I went on the night, the audience came in. I was really, really nervous and frightened. And then he gave me that twinkle, that look, as if to say, "You can do it. You can do it. Here we go." And it happened. And that is the gift that you just can't buy anywhere. That's somebody gifting you with something that is going to stay with me right the way through your life, not your career, your life. Because instead of just making a fool of myself and then blubbing my way for the next 5 days when I got home, and crying my eyes out, he stopped me from that happening. He allowed me to flourish. And if I can do that for one person who wants to be part of show business, to be part of theatre, then that would make me very happy. So God bless you, Brucey. Yes, we did a lot of work together after that, and and his own coterie is the wrong word. His team with Lionel Blair and we did a show with Bruce and Frankie Howard, Frankie Vaughan, Lionel, Tommy Cooper. This was an Easter TV show. And because I had been all right with Bruce on that sketch, I was able to go and do the best Christmas show for television, which they repeated at Easter because it was such a magical show. So, the dog's barking, darling. That's Lulu, by the way. That's a lovely friend's dog. Oh.
But that's lovely to hear, though, that Bruce wanted to do that for you, and that then stopped you from later on being a bit wary of comedy.
I was always nervous in everything I did. I used to have stomach cramps. I hardly ever got over being nervous, but it was my darling Mike that said, "Let's turn these nerves, which are nerves of fear, into nerves of positivity and energy." And that's the difference. Nerves are because you worry. I worry that I'm not good enough, or I'm not prepared enough, or I think I can't do it how I want to do it to the best of my ability. So turning, and I'm sure it's what's happening in football at the moment with the World Cup, with the European Cup. It's what tennis players, it's what athletes, it's everything. We have to learn how to handle our fragilities. And so nerves are just a word, but it's how to handle our inner self to be able to give of our best, isn't it? I mean, God created us. God said, you're going to be a singer and a dancer. Whatever we believe in, or whatever our parents have gifted us with, whatever, it's down to that performance at that moment. And when I went into Cats, I remember the Deuteronomy of that time was John Turner, and he said, look at these people, they've come from all over the world to see this show, Cats, and they've flown in, they're paying extraordinary amounts of money to see this show, and they're going to see it once. So our performance for that show is going to be with them forever. So it's got to be the best. It can't be how it was last night or the other afternoon. It's got to be the best now. And it's maintaining a moment, which is the gift that audience has paid for, has looked forward to, has driven or been, come for miles to see, to take that moment home and cherish it. That's what it's about, really, isn't it, darling?
Words.
Hey?
What wonderful
That's
words.
what we're here for. Yeah. And Beautiful.
The beer. Well, then you went and appeared in a few films, especially in British Psyche, and I'm a huge comedy fan, and you were in one of my all-time favourite films, Carry On Doctor.
Thank you, yes.
And you had two many standout scenes, actually. With the lovely Sid James.
Oh.
And Frankie Howard when his pants got removed, which you could have
is in the photograph forever. Yes. With me holding them up.
and how did that happen?
Okay, I'll try and make this brief. Talking of briefs.
Yes.
Okay, so we've chopped and changed in the years of my life, but it really all started with Mike getting me recording in those days with EMI and then CBS. With in those days the British artists, singers, could have a hit that was already a hit in America with talk about the Burt Bacharach songs and Hal David songs. So if Dionne Warwick had a hit, then you could also have a hit in England with it, in Great Britain. So I was singing at the time Trains and Boats and Planes on Top of the Pops. And on the same show, a young lady, blonde, was singing You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, Just Be Close at Hand, Dusty Springfield. Now, Dusty and I had met at a club in Nottingham years before, and she was finishing on the Saturday and I was opening on the Sunday at this club. And so I went up on the Saturday to see her, saw her show, which was superb, beautifully sung. Then we met for breakfast in the morning, and at the reception desk was an Afghan hound, which neither of us had seen before. And to cut a very long story short, this dog happened to have puppies, and I ended my week bringing home a puppy which was called Belshazzar of Pooan, and Mike and I called him Albert, the Afghan. So there's Dusty and I in there, right. Now, years later, I'm singing Trains and Boats and Planes, Top of the Pops. She is sitting while I rehearse. She stayed sitting in the audience with all the empty chairs. And she came across after I'd finished my rehearsal, and she said, Anita, you and your Mike have to meet my brother Tom because I think he's got a song for you. And that song was Just Loving You. And to this day, when it's still in my act, when I do my cabaret and my concerts, I say, thank you, Dusty, because that was the gift. She could have had that song for herself. She was going through the sort of period where she was doing songs like Son of a Preacher Man, and so her music tastes were changing. But the fact that she was offering me a song that her brother had written that she could so easily have recorded herself. So thank you, Dusty. That song is the one that took me to the Palladium, and that song is what took me onwards and onwards and onwards. It took, after the Palladium, I went across the road to the Piccadilly Theatre and to a review. I took over from Cilla Black in a review with Frankie Howard. And the Irving Davis choreography, God bless him, and song and dance. And I did a couple of sketches with Frankie. And they, go back to learning curve again. And one night, Frankie said, the Carry On people are in. And into my dressing room after the show comes Peter Rogers and Jerry Thomas, producer and director of the Carry On films. They had come to see Frankie to discuss him going into the next film. And they came into my dressing room and said, would you like to be in a Carry On film? And that's how it happened. That's how it happened. So the first one was not with Frankie. The first one I did was Carry On, Follow That Camel with Phil Silvers. They brought in Phil Silvers. And of course, I guess the biggest learning curve, first film, that incredible team of beautiful British actors who then became like a repertory company within the framework of a film. So you're talking, as you said, with darling Sid James, with that, all of those names, dear Barbara and Kenneth Williams and Kenneth Connor and Peter Butterworth and it was and Joan Sims and the first day's filming, I had come down. Mike had driven me from up north. We were filming in the Sahara Desert, which was Camber Sands in March. We arrived at about 2 a.m, and I was literally on those sands, starting the filming and starting the makeup and everything at 6 the following morning. And then I was sitting next to Phil Silvers, waiting to be called and doing my first bit of dialogue. I mean, it's just like a dream, isn't it? So we did that film. Wow, it was wonderful. And then the call came because Frankie Howard has said he would like me to be with him in Carry On Doctor. And as you say, I think, again, we've talked about children growing up knowing theatre, but children, each generation, seem to love the Carry-Ons, don't they? So all of that story is because that took me then into Carry On Doctor. And it was mostly filmed at Pinewood Studios. Just going there through those gates and into that big studio is such your heart flutters with the amount of work that's come out of those studios. And to sit in sometimes you couldn't have lunch every day, but there's a beautiful canteen there and you look around and there's Shirley Eaton and all, so many other film stars all having a bit of nosh. So those are the beautiful off-duty moments that one cherishes. I just want to say that the Carry On, you have to say team because that's what they were. with Hattie Jakes and Joan Sims and darling Barbara. Barbara was always first to arrive in the mornings for the 6 o'clock makeup call. And I was driving myself out to Pinewood every morning from London, and she was the first to say, "Cup of tea, love." She'd always have the kettle on in the makeup room, you know. Bless her heart. And darling Sid, and of course my first screen kiss was Jim Dale. Oh, bless his heart. He was so lovely. God bless you, Jim. I think, again, I had to prove myself to, especially Kenneth Williams. I felt I had to prove myself as an actress because in Tramlines, I was a singer that was coming into the acting world. And the best moment of that film for me was off film, when I suddenly felt a big kiss planted on my left cheek, and it was Kenneth Williams, and he went, "You're all right, girl."
Oh, the seal of approval.
Yes, the seal of approval. But yeah, I guess sometimes as human beings, that's what we want in our lives. Is it the love of our parents and their approval of what we do and how we flourish? Is it that we continue with an audience, with people we work with? We just want to just feel that we're doing our best, don't we? All of us. So it's little moments like that you think, "Ooh, yeah, that was a lovely day, that was, and a lovely moment." So from Carry-Ons and to all of the world of Panto and the world of theatre, and then the places like the Talk of the Town, which was a venue in London that took from Vegas the huge theatre cabaret room. So it's like a theatre, it's as big as a theatre, but people are sitting at tables. But because the Talk of the Town was the Hippodrome, therefore it was a theatre, so there were tiers, the circle and then the upper circle. You still had that, but they were obviously in a cabaret mode, and the stage would be on the floor and then would rise up. And I did 6 seasons at the Talk of the Town, and you went on at 10 to 11 at night. And one night I was filming there, and that's where you talked about other artists, seeing other artists. That night when I was being filmed, Bruce was there, Danny was there. Oh gosh, my dressing room afterwards was jam-packed. And it was just felt like an American dream, you know. Just felt like how it feels when you think, oh, you've passed that exam, or you've worked so hard, and that moment, yeah, it's like scoring a goal, I guess. Yeah. So yes. So darling, how can I pay tribute to what you, Hayden, so beautifully contribute to people and young people that aspire to just entering the world of showbiz? It doesn't always have to be on stage, you know. It doesn't always have to be in the spotlight. You can be a member of a company. You can paint the scenery. You can be a costumier. You can be part of sewing a costume. You can be part of lighting, part of the sound, part of being an usherette. You can be part of a world of theatre and feel that you have a new family where everybody just wants something that is the same, and that is a beautiful show.
Thank you. That really means a lot. Thank you.
Bless your heart, darling. I love what you're doing with the podcast. And I love the fact that you are sharing it with the world. And it's It's lovely to see young people come into it, isn't it? And see the stepping stones and the watch them grow and watch them flourish. It's lovely, really lovely.
Recently, you've gone to the dark side, haven't you? You've been a bit of a baddie recently. How did you find that?
Well, they won't let me slap my thigh anymore. So I'm now, as you say, the baddie. I'm the wicked queen, love.
Did you like that, getting booed?
Oh, of course, it's wonderful. And I sing bad. B-A-D, bad. It's lovely. The more booze you get, the better.
Is it really? Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
And how did you go about playing that? Because you mentioned the lovely Alan Curtis earlier on, who sadly passed away a little while ago. Who did you look at to sort of...
Well, I guess he instilled a lot into me. I don't know. My first Wicked Queen was at the Red Hill Theatre. And more recently at the wonderful Windsor Theatre. And there you've got... Stephen Blakely writes the pantomime there, and he is a wonderful dame, and he partners Kevin Cruz. If you've ever seen them together, they are hysterical. I want you to mention all the other names that we know and love, because that we don't have time now. I have to mention Biggins because I think he's been a huge importance in bringing pantomime to folk that probably wouldn't normally go to a pantomime. Mike, my husband, saw Chris in a Shakespearean production when they were probably both in their 20s. And he never stopped talking about how beautifully Chris portrayed that character in Shakespeare. And I'm sure Chris has allowed that to help him grow. I've never done a panto or done a theatre production with Chris, but I've done a lot of charities. And he puts into his work for charity as if it is a theatrical play. And he is a wonderful man to raise funds. Again, because he's so genuine, isn't he? And people love him. But he knows how to make people laugh as well. He's got that lovely thing about a comic. But at the root of Chris is an actor that Mike and I have always appreciated. So, I love him. He's lovely, as we all know. But there are so many other wonderful artists that I would love to list that I've had the pleasure of working with, that have gifted their lives. People that have made their own costumes, that spent so much of their lives wanting to give pleasure to an audience. And what comes out of that, of course, is just a love of... The phone goes, "Are you free for Panto?" Oh, yes. Not only have I got a job, but I've got a job that I love doing, right?
Well, this leads me on to my last question.
Okay.
Your dream pantomime. So you could be in it, you can be in the stalls watching it, you can choose the production, you can choose the venue, and your cast can be a mix of alive or dead or both.
Golly Wally Doodles.
And all the people you've worked with over the years, I mean, you could get them all into an arena, and you wouldn't even have room for the punters, would you? It would just be...
Well, the Palladium is a Frank Matcham theatre. The glory of the Palladium is the structure. It's like an opera house, just a bit bigger. And to be on that stage, where you can look up at the gods and feel you can touch them and they can touch you, and to be on that stage with some of the people I've mentioned, to have Billy Dainty, or Stephen, or Biggins, or Danny LaRue, or Bernie Breslau, or for nowadays John Altman, to have Tom Owen, who is a friend, and Freddie Davis, to have Frankie Howard, to have Bernie Clifton, who, by the way, still got a pair of my knickers somewhere from Vegas. But don't tell anybody.
You just have.
And I have to mention Brick Lane Theatre as well, because they do a wonderful comedy pantomime. But to be either back at the Palladium and feel the world of Vesta Tilley and Dan Leno, to bring some of those ghosts of Panto's past and bring them into Panto's future. And then we are here, Panto now, to feel the joy from the children. It's just, I suppose, if I had to just sum up, being with people that I have genuinely loved working with, genuinely shared those moments on stage where we have looked in each other's eyes, been able to giggle at something secret, but knowing that the audience are sharing that secret, to have sung with the best, to have danced with some wonderful dancers. I think in the smallness of a theatre that is large in itself, it just comes down to us all being in that spotlight, in the warmth of that light, and feeling that we are where we should be and together.
Well, Anita, thank you so much for taking part in the Panto podcast.
Oh, my love. I think we do share the love of it, don't we?
Definitely.
Oh, yes, we do. God bless you, darling. Thank you.
The Panto Podcast.